Have you ever thought about whether numbers, numbers in old religious texts might actually hold clues, maybe even point to future events?
It's a fascinating idea, isn't it? People have always looked for patterns, for meaning, especially in sacred writings, trying to find some kind of divine plan.
Exactly. And that search for meaning, that brings us straight to what we're doing today.
Mhm.
We're going to take a deep dive into a very specific and honestly pretty intriguing interpretation of biblical prophecy.
Mhm.
It really zeroes in on the number 7, its significance, and it builds up to this incredibly precise prediction,
Which
a
is,
September rapture in the year 2025.
wow, okay. Very specific indeed. And for this deep dive, we've been looking at some particular sources, right?
That's right. We've gone through a few YouTube videos
Hmm.
from a channel called Rapture Ready, specifically videos 1, 2, and 3 from their series that's titled, well, it's got hashtags. Hashtag September, Rapture, the number 7 in the Bible points to the hashtag Rapture this year, hashtag 2025.
Got it. So, Rapture Ready's interpretation of the number 7 leading to September 2025.
Exactly. And just to be clear about our mission today, we're here to guide you through their calculations, their interpretations, how they connect different Bible verses.
Right. The goal isn't for us to say they're right or wrong.
No, not at all. It's about understanding how they arrive at this 2025 prediction.
Mm.
We want to lay out their arguments, the logic they use, so you can see the framework they've built.
And I'll chime in to, maybe connect some of these specific points to wider themes and how people study the Bible. Or this whole human quest to find meaning and timelines in ancient texts.
Great. I'm actually pretty excited to unpack this. It's quite a complex tapestry they weave, pulling together scripture, numbers, history. It's
Yeah.
fascinating to see how they construct the timeline.
It really is. So where do they start? How does this number 7 become the foundation?
Well, they point out it appears a lot in the Bible, over 700 times apparently.
Which to them signals it's not just coincidence. It suggests divine importance. They argue God isn't about chance. Numbers have real meaning in his plan.
Okay, so 7 is key. But how do they handle the concept of time itself in prophecy? Because that seems crucial to getting to a specific year like 2025.
Absolutely. They use a couple of interpretive principles. First, there's the day for a year idea. You see that mentioned in Numbers and Ezekiel.
Right, where a prophetic day can stand for a literal year.
Exactly. But even more significant for their big picture is interpreting a day as 1,000 years.
1,000 years? Where does that come from?
They pull that from verses like Psalm 90.4, 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday, and also 10 Peter 3.8. With the Lord, one day is as 1,000 years.
And 1,000 years is one day. Okay, so God's time frame is vastly different.
That's the idea. It lets them think in these huge millennial blocks of time, prophetic cycles, you could say.
So if one of God's days is like 1,000 years for us, how do they build a timeline for all of human history from that?
They propose a grand 7,000-year plan. Think of it like 7 days of 1,000 years each.
Echoing the creation week.
Precisely. They break it down like this. Roughly 2,000 years from creation to Abraham. Then another 2,000 from Abraham to Christ.
Okay, that's 4,000.
Then, crucially, 2,000 years for what they call the church age, from Christ up to basically now. And then finally, a 1,000-year millennium when Christ reigns on earth.
Which adds up to 7,000 years. The full cycle.
Exactly. That 7,000-year structure is their overarching framework.
And you mentioned this church age. That seems like a really critical piece.
Yeah.
How do they support that idea, especially the 2,000-year length?
They lean heavily on passages like Hosea chapter 6, verse 2. After 2 days, he will revive us. On the third day, he will raise us up.
Okay.
They interpret those 2 days as the 2,000 years after Jesus' crucifixion, the time when the gospel spreads, essentially the age of the church.
While Israel is sort of set aside temporarily.
That's part of this particular interpretation, often called dispensationalism, yes.
Hmm.
This 2,000-year period, or gap, is seen as the time for reaching the Gentiles before God's focus returns fully to Israel, and the third day in Hosea. That's the millennium.
Okay, so this 2,000-year church age is key. How do they use that to pinpoint 2025 for the rapture? And what about the tribulation period we hear about?
Right, good question. So they start with the crucifixion date. They place it in 32 AD.
Okay.
Add the 2,000 years for that church age we just discussed.
If you get 2032.
Exactly. But, and this is the crucial step, they believe in a pre-tribulation rapture.
Meaning believers are taken out before the really bad stuff starts.
Correct. They cite verses like 1 Thessalonians 5.9, God has not destined us for wrath, to argue the church must be removed before the 7-year tribulation period begins.
That 7-year period of intense judgment described in Revelation and other places.
Right. So if the tribulation lasts 7 years, and the church has to be gone before it starts, they subtract those 7 years from their 2032 date.
Ah, okay. 2032 minus 7. That lands you squarely in 2025.
That's their calculation. The rapture happens in 2025, kicking off the final 7 years, which culminate around 2032, leading into the millennium.
So the rapture believers meeting Christ in the air happens just before that final 7-year countdown.
That's their timeline. And they'd add that those 7 years can't be part of the millennium itself because Jesus is already reigning on earth then.
Okay, I see how they build that timeline. Now, within that big 7,000-year picture, they also seem to zoom in on other prophecies, especially from the book of Daniel, right? The 70 weeks.
Oh, absolutely. Daniel 9 is huge for them. The prophecy states 70 weeks are determined for your people Israel and your holy city Jerusalem.
But these aren't normal weeks.
No, they interpret them as weeks of years. So each week is 7 years. 70 times 7 gives you
490 years.
right, a 490-year prophetic period, specifically concerning Israel and Jerusalem. They pegged the start date to Artaxerxes' decree to rebuild Jerusalem in 445 BC.
And Daniel breaks that 70 down further, doesn't he? Into 7 weeks and 62 weeks.
He does. So that's 7 sevens plus 62 sevens, which makes 69 sevens in total,
69 times 7 years.
which is 483 years. And according to these sources, that 483-year period, starting from that decree in 445 BC, leads precisely to the time of Christ's crucifixion, which again, they date to 32 AD. They see this as an astonishingly accurate prophecy pinpointing the death of the Messiah.
Okay, so 69 of the 70 weeks are accounted for leading up to Christ's death. What happens to the last one? 70th week.
That's another crucial piece of their interpretation. They argue that the prophetic clock stopped after the 69th week.
Stopped. Why?
Because Israel, as a nation, rejected the Messiah. So that final 7-year period, the 70th week, was put on pause, essentially.
And this is where the church age fits in again.
Exactly. That 2,000-year period we talked about, the church age, is seen as this gap or parenthesis in God's timeline for Israel. It wasn't fully revealed in the Old Testament, they'd say, but it's the time for the gospel to go to the Gentiles, like Jesus mentioned in Matthew 24.
So the clock stopped at 69 weeks. There's a 2,000-year pause for the church age. And then the final 70th week, that 7-year tribulation period, still has to happen in the future.
That's precisely their view. That final week of Daniel's prophecy is the 7-year tribulation, and it starts only after the church is raptured.
Wow. Okay. It's intricate. Now, beyond the weeks, the number 70 itself seems important to them. They mentioned it symbolizes perfect spiritual order.
Yes, they emphasize the symbolism of 70 quite a bit, and they connect this strongly to Jewish cycles, particularly the Sabbatical and Jubilee years.
Remind us how those work.
Okay, so ancient Israel had a 7-year agricultural cycle, the Shemitah. Every 7th year, the land rested.
Okay.
Then, after 7 of those cycles, so 7 times 7 is 49 years, the following year, the 50th year, was declared the year of Jubilee.
The Jubilee. That was a big deal.
Huge. Leviticus 25 describes it. It was a year of release debts canceled, slaves freed, land returned to its original owners. A total reset, signifying restoration and freedom.
Okay, so how does the Jubilee connect specifically to 2025 in their argument?
This is another major pillar for them. They claim that 2025 isn't just any Jubilee year, but it's the 70th Jubilee year since Israel first entered the Promised Land, which they date to 1406 BC.
The 70th Jubilee. There's that number 70 again, tying into perfect spiritual order.
Exactly. They see that convergence as highly significant. And they point out other 70s in the Bible. 70 descendants of Noah founding nations, 70 Israelites going to Egypt, 70 elders with Moses, later 70 in the Sanhedrin, Jesus sending out 70 disciples.
So this idea of Jubilee, of restoration and release, isn't just an Old Testament thing for them.
Not at all. They connect it directly to Jesus. Remember in Luke 4, he reads from Isaiah 61 about proclaiming the year of the Lord's favor?
Yes.
They see that as Jesus invoking the spirit of the Jubilee, proclaiming spiritual release and restoration through himself. They even mention some Dead Sea Scrolls talking about a future ultimate Jubilee. It reinforces this theme of a grand final restoration.
Okay, so we have the 7,000-year plan, the 2,000-year church age calculation leading to 2032 minus 7 years, Daniel's 70 weeks with a gap, and now the 70th Jubilee landing in 2025. It's a lot of numerical alignment.
It is. They build layer upon layer.
Do they point to anything happening now, any current events, that they believe validates this 2025 timeline?
They do. They see contemporary signs. For example, they note that in 2025, the modern state of Israel will turn 77 years old.
77. More sevens.
Right. Highly symbolic in their view. But maybe the most pointed current event they highlight comes from a news report.
What's that?
They reference a Times of Israel article from April of this year, 2024, assuming based on context, which apparently mentioned mediators proposing a 5 to 7 year truce involving an IDF pullout from Gaza and a hostage prisoner swap.
A 5 to 7 year truce.
They seize on that mention of 7 years. They interpret this news as potentially being the precursor to the 7-year covenant or treaty mentioned in Daniel 9.27.
The treaty, the Antichrist figure, is supposed to confirm or strengthen.
Exactly. The Antichrist, in their view, is this future world leader who makes a deceptive peace deal with Israel, which kicks off the 7-year tribulation. So seeing talk of a potential 7-year deal in the news right now, for them, that's a massive sign that the start of that final 7-year period is extremely close.
It really pulls everything together for their argument, doesn't it? Biblical numbers, the historical dates, the prophetic interpretations, and now current events, all converging, in their view, on September 2025.
That's the essence of it. They present it as a convergence of multiple prophetic streams, all pointing to that specific time frame. The message is very much about being watchful, being ready.
They emphasize not being caught by surprise, right? Like the thief in the night passage in 1 Thessalonians 5.
Precisely. They believe these signs, these converging sevens, allow believers to discern the approximate time, even if they don't know the exact day or hour.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap the core argument we've unpacked.
Good idea.
The source material, Rapture Ready, uses the number 7, its prevalence in the Bible, the 7,000-year plan mirroring creation, the 7-year cycles, and combines it with specific timelines.
Right. Key timelines being Daniel's 70 weeks, interpreted with a gap for a 2,000-year church age calculated from 32 AD, leading to 2032 minus 7 years for the tribulation.
Which lands us at 2025. And this is supported, in their view, by 2025 being the 70th Jubilee since 1406 BC, Israel turning 77, and recent news about a potential 7-year peace deal. All pointing, for them, to a September 2025 rapture.
And just to reiterate, our goal here was really to explain how they build that case, to show you the methodology, the specific verses they use, the calculations involved, so you understand the argument itself.
Exactly.